Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Buckland, pastor at Suncrest United Methodist Church. I want to welcome you to another episode of The Rev Rambles On. We have Mark Markle with us today. And how are you, Mark?
I'm doing great, Larry. Just got back from annual conference, as did you. And I'm looking forward to conversation going back a couple of weeks. So let's get on with it.
I am too. It's been annual conference was always interesting and a lot of fun. We'll probably talk about that here in a little bit, but I'm glad to be back.
Okay. The subject is the Sabbath, Sunday, how to honor it. The verses called that up, and I just want to, first question is, what is the Sabbath? What is the correct way to religiously observe it, live it, keep it? And the key word here is holy.
The legal idea that we know came from the Old Testament was that it was a day that you didn't do anything. It was a day of rest, which when we look up the word Sabbath, that does include that definition, rest. But the idea was that you didn't do any type of work or things that you could do ahead of time during the week. It was a day of rest, a day that was kept holy by the religious authorities and the folks, and it was a law that you didn't do those things on the Sabbath.
It was a religious law.
Yes.
But very binding on the people who were Jews at the time.
I was going to say,
Israeli.
For Jewish people, all the laws were
Hard.
Yeah.
Hard binding. Does it necessarily include worship?
I don't think so. I think that it was more of that day of rest. I think it could have been part of worship too, but it was definitely to say everything else is off limits on that day on the Sabbath.
Why?
Well, the first 6 days, the other 6 days of the week, you can do it all, Mark, right? Get it all done in 6 days. And I'm sure, even we as Christians, when we read our Holy Scriptures, it was the idea that on the seventh day of creation, God rested.
Okay, I'm going to call you.
Call me.
That commandment is listed twice in the Bible. The one you cited is from the Exodus. The other one is in Deuteronomy. It doesn't talk anything at all about creation. It says to essentially brought them out of the captivity
and slavery. Yeah.
Oh,
I agree with you. I'm saying now as a Christian tradition, when you take a look at that and trying to argue or debate to prove the point of the Sabbath that, even God rested.
Okay.
And so I completely agree with what you're saying there in Deuteronomy, that there was a day set aside, and there's a lot that we can still learn from that, as we will talk about here from this passage, about what does Sabbath look like for all of us? What does that look like for our family time, our rest to be able to do all the other things that we need to do and do it well?
So what are those?
What are the other things we need to do well?
On that day or any day?
Well, I think Sabbath looks different for everyone. Now, for me, it's not always a certain day, Mark. For me, of course, I'm a pastor, as you know.
Yeah, you work on Sunday.
I work on Sunday. So the reality is I don't feel like it's a whole lot of work, especially the preaching part. So I love worship, and I love being a part of it and engaging in it. However, I try to take some time off. Sometimes that time might be flexible at different times. It might not be a whole day of Sabbath like when we're looking at this ideology. Ideally, Friday is the day that I like to take off. I've always been that way. My first semester of college, I had classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then I would have a Monday, Wednesday, or a Tuesday, Thursday classes. And I loved having Fridays off. And if I didn't have Friday off, I really tried to make that morning schedule. And that way, that Friday afternoon and evening. So I always looked forward. I was truly a TGIF kind of guy.
Well, that actually harkens back to ancient times, because the Sabbath was from Friday afternoon to Saturday afternoon, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah. So you will see, oftentimes, I don't look to schedule work things on Friday, and especially in the life of the church, I don't try to do things on Friday evening. There are occasions that there is, and more often than not, I hope it's a fun thing if we do. And then, of course, there is, during the end of the season of Lent, there is Good Friday. And so more often than not, that weekend is a little busy. So we look for other times for Sabbath, usually on Monday morning after Easter.
But then you're kind of saying we can choose our Sabbath. We can choose the day we take off.
I do.
relax?
I think you can. I think in today's culture as well. I mean, the work week has changed for our civilization. You know, it's not just a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And it really hasn't been like that for some time. But a lot of people still make it that way. I even sometimes think about the church, how we have made the day of Sabbath to be Sunday when there are so many people that excludes. So I'm grateful for online worship where people can tune in when it's convenient for them, and all the other times that we can choose Sabbath or choose worship to be. So our world has changed. God is not, but our world has changed, and the workday looks different. I remember growing up as a kid, I mentioned it, I think, during the sermon about it was a big deal seeing banners over grocery stores open on Sundays, that, you know, a lot of businesses were not open. And now it's almost more surprising when you see a restaurant or a store not open on Sunday.
Yeah, I remember those times. We moved to West Virginia from California. And so when I came here and found that you couldn't buy gardening gloves from the store, but you could buy aspirin because there was some kind of a differentiation. One is a necessity, one is not.
Right.
It was a surprise to me. It was a surprise. Didn't last long, but it was here in 1980. Kind of a bigger question. So we have this commandment, honor the Sabbath, keep it holy. In one case, to remember the time that we were freed, being we, the Jewish people. And the other is to commemorate that God worked 6 days and rested the seventh. We come to the verse for today, and it says, Jesus walked through the field and picked grain off of the wheat, and then went and had the audacity to actually heal a man's withered hand. And he says that the Sabbath is his. It's not, what does he say? Humans are not made for the Sabbath. The Sabbath is made for humans.
Right.
How do we contrast the commandment versus Jesus's actions and words?
First, I just want to try to, and I get in trouble for this, Mark, because I try to take a little bit of liberties of thinking what we don't know and what we didn't read. I just imagine Jesus walking through the fields, having a nice Sabbath day with his friends. A rest day, taking a hike.
Yeah.
And as he's going, he's plucking the grains there and having a good time. And it was seen, though, as a workful act. And then he happens upon a man that is withered, hand crippled, and decides that why wait till tomorrow to make this man's life better? To me, it was a Sabbath day. Jesus was saying, okay, let's go for a walk, friends. And on that walk, you run into somebody that's hurt or physically impaired, and Jesus can do something about it. He could have said, okay, let's make an appointment for tomorrow. That's what he could have done, right?
Yeah, modern medicine.
My office hours are at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Okay, come on in at 9.
Yeah, okay. You're making your point really strong.
So you know, I could do the same thing, Mark. When I'm done at noonish on Sunday, and somebody is outside wanting to talk and needing their own way of finding Sabbath or peace or healing, and says, Pastor, I would really like to meet with you. I'm going through this. Okay, I'll see you. I'll be back in tomorrow at 9.
Doesn't sound right.
Do you think I would do that, Mark?
No, not in a heartbeat.
No, I am going to say, let's go find a room and let's talk. And Jesus happens with this person and allows the healing of God's love and grace to take care of this man. Now, this changed everything because everyone was watching to see what he would do. But also, what happened for that man? We don't get to hear about that. But how did it change that man's life? This man that was with a withered hand probably was unfortunately not able to work. And now he's entered back into the realm of life. Resurrection takes place by the healing of this man's hand. And what are the others going to think of him, though? Is he going to be welcomed back into society because he was healed on the Sabbath?
I hadn't thought about it that way. I just thought about he was healed and he would be welcome back, but there may be some stigma associated with it.
Well, you're healed, but you did that on the day that it's not allowed.
Particularly since the Pharisees and the others watching, went back and kind of connived to make this a big issue for what was to come.
Exactly. It was a beginning of the religious leaders and those trying to take down Jesus.
Actually, that brings to mind, or my notes leave, that cat and mouse game between Jesus and the powers that be. I have to smile, maybe even laugh out loud with what he, puts them right up there in front of everybody and says, well, you don't want me to help this man?
That's right.
And they are afraid to say anything. They just kind of sneak off.
Right.
I think they figured out he was right, but they had a mission.
Yeah. And so today, even some doctors' offices like clinics or emergent cares are open now on Sundays. Yep. Of course, the hospitals are open on Sundays. And I don't think it's routine for procedures to happen on Sunday, but guess what, Mark? They do. They happen because there are emergent things that take place. So I'm grateful that, a couple of weeks ago, we had a young man, his two little girls, he and his family, the two little girls were being baptized that morning. Unfortunately, that didn't get to take place because he had an emergency and needed a procedure. And I'm so glad that when he went to the hospital and went to the emergency room that they didn't close the doors and say, we can't help you today. So to me, what Sabbath is how can it be something that gives life, that restores life? It's restoration. We all need to take Sabbath and find ways that we can be fueled and be restored and find our path to being made whole and the rest that we need so that we can get back at it again.
What I hear you saying is that Sabbath can be a communal thing, like on Sunday here when we come together, but it also has an opportunity to be an individual thing. We just have to find time in our lives to take that period of rest and separation and contemplation and communing with God.
Communing with God can be, like you said, individually. I think it can also be, like you said, here in worship in a community. Actually, tomorrow, Mark, I can't wait. I'm actually getting some Sabbath, but it's not by myself.
What are you up to?
I'm going with the middle school youth to Cooper's Rock. And you know what? It's probably not going to be all that quiet.
No, it will not be.
So barring any emergencies here at the church, I'm going to be going with them out to Cooper's Rock and enjoying God's creation and a beautiful place we are blessed with here in Morgantown. Cooper's Rock, if you haven't gotten there or if you're not from here, I encourage you when you make a stop in Morgantown that you check out Cooper's Rock. And I'm looking forward to this time of Sabbath and rest, but being with some of our youth that I don't always get to do that.
I'm very glad you got the opportunity because being with youth in my history, I was with them a lot.
I know you.
And they invigorate me.
Yeah, they restore.
They restorative.
That's exactly right.
It's a Sabbath.
I can't wait.
Okay, let's touch a little bit on annual conference.
Yeah.
If you're a Methodist, you may know something about what annual conference is. And if you're not, we're not going to give you all the details, but it's 4 days where Methodists from across West Virginia and Garrett County, Maryland, come together and do business.
Yes.
I think a lot of people who've never been there think they spend a lot of time, or the people there spend a lot of time debating nuances of language and this sentence or that. It's not. It's not. It's a celebration. It's worship. It's fellowship. 5% of the time may be in debating a resolution. But I'm telling you, the excitement, the fellowship, the getting another, oh, I haven't seen you in a while. Glad you're here. Wow, where have you been? What are you doing? That's all part of the biggest part of annual conference, in my mind.
Yeah, it brings
You've
about,
been going a lot longer than I have.
Brings about a connectional church.
It
and
is.
Reminds us that we are stronger together. I still believe that in the midst of some denominational strife of things that transpired with